Hi, Misha here, and on this channel, I've talked a good bit about Germany's Heckler & Koch G36. But very early on, we also looked at this model here, or at least a converted version of it, the civilian SL8 6. Well over 10 years ago, we did a video looking at one of these that had been converted by Tom Bostic, into a G36K. Well, this one came in for a customer, and I thought, yeah, why don't we revisit it and really talk about what HK did and did not do with this model. And it's kind of interesting history. It's not just a civilianized, a sporterized, a bastardized G36. Well, not entirely. And here we have the other side. Note that area. We'll get back to it. And note the barrel. Now, the SL8-6 is the most common variant you'll find in America, but it's not the only one that came in. And there are other variants that other nations had. But before we talk about all the dash versions, well, I've got to bring my G36 out so we can really compare and contrast. G36 with the dual optic. Hold open. Now, the original Bundeswehr G36 was adopted in 1997, and it would start to go into widespread military use, and it's still used today. In 1998, HK first announced and released a semi-automatic version, the SL8. Initially, early days, the safe semi-only version was thought to be a cheaper, safer way to train troops and keep reserve troops up to speed on the new G36. Kind of like the Romanian G rifles, the Romy G, the Garda guns. Same concept. But it would quickly evolve into very much a sporterized version here. And they would sporterize more than usual. And it was a bit of a victim of its own timing, if I'm being honest. Now, the good news is the SL8 really is a true all-German gun made by Heckler & Koch. This isn't an outsourced gun. It's not a 22 replica. And, of course, it has the very famous cold hammer forged barrel. But it is actually quite a bit heavier than even a dual optic G36. The G36 with the dual optics roughly 8 pounds. Take the dual optic off and go to a rail, that can drop down to 7.5, even 7.25 pounds. Go to the G36K carbine, you can get nearly 6.5 pounds. Go to the G36C, some versions of it are not much over 6 pounds. Very light gun. Makes sense because it's nearly all polymer except for the barrel, trunnion, and bolt. You look at the SL8 series, these range from 8.6 all the way up to 8.8 pounds. Now, they're not longer than a G36. In fact, they're slightly shorter, at least when the stock is with the spacers removed. They're about 38.5 inches, whereas the standard G36 is a little over 39. And the barrels lengthwise aren't a lot different. This has an 18.9 inch barrel. This has a 20.1 inch. So only about 1.25 inches. The difference is this is a much heavier profile with a target crown, whereas this has a removable muzzle device, bayonet lug, and a thinner profile. Now, They do use the same short stroke AR-180, AR-18 inspired gas system. Same type of construction for the receiver, but totally different stocks. So let's start here, because this is really where things differ. The military version has a square back with push pins for disassembly, folding stock. The SL8, as far as I know, all of them have kind of it's not exactly a slant back receiver, but an angle back receiver that protrudes further, and it's actually held together with a double-headed screw, kind of like a SP1. And that's to allow this new pattern of buttstock. Now this is a relatively nice stock. It has an adjustable cheek piece, it has the spacers in the back with the rubber butt plate, and it has sling loops. It even has a reworked trigger. The trigger group is part of the stock. It's a little bit lighter than a standard military grade, so that's nice. And the top rail section on the receiver, while it had its own type, these are interchangeable with your military rails. Now the one on this one is a different style. It did come with the other one too. There's a lot of different units. And the handguards would change, although these had the standard, let's call it a rifle length handguard, not a shorter K or C type. But then you get to the magazines, and that's kind of an unfortunate timing of when these were introduced. Prior to 1998, guns could be imported with standard mag wells, so what we would commonly think of as double stack. Unfortunately, 1998, the same year the SL8 was introduced, the U.S. changed things. Now, weapons could no longer come in able to accept magazines over 10 rounds. So, they took the 30-round standard mag, and they reworked it in a similar style and mold, but to a single stack 10-rounder. And they did not just change the magwell. On the G36, the magwell just pops off with a push pin. This has a removable magwell as well, but the receiver up top is also dimpled in. So, not only is the back of the receiver a totally wrong shape for the standard stock and grip trigger pack, the magwell has this big dimple in the side. They even removed the notch. You can notice on the brass deflector on this one, there's a little notch on top for the stock. That's gone here too. Yeah. And this is on top of having a different profile barrel that we'll look at in just a minute. You can definitely tell HK really civilianized these, and we're definitely not done talking about it. So that kind of explains some of the weight and complexity. But what about the different variants? Like I said, this is an SL8-6. The original, the initial SL8, was designed for the European market and, at the time, Canada. Remember, it's late 90s. It took standard G36 mags, and it had the thumbhole stock, and it actually had a non-ventilated handguard. And it had a gray finish to make it look, I don't know, like an IBM computer from that era, I guess. Honestly, just to make it not look like a black rifle. And it had a short top rail. So, that was the regular SL8. The SL8-1, which was the US variant, was the same. It was gray. It had a non-ventilated handguard, standard bull barrel. And it was the first to take these truncated single-stack 10-round mags. One thing it did have, it had the longer top rail with iron sights. So, I guess that's a small improvement. There was technically an SL8 2, at least on the drawing boards. It was actually designed to compete to be the Bundeswehr's next DMR, something it would lose. But it was meant to be fitted with a bipod and 3 to 3.5 power optic, yada yada. They really never put them into mass production. And nothing really to mention for a Dash 3. The Dash 4s, that's when we first go to black here. And the Dash 4 was again a European-Canadian variant, so it took a 30-round mag. And it would introduce, like I said, an all-black finish, and it would be the first to have a ventilated handguard. So getting closer to this one. The Dash 4 and the Dash 5 are very similar. They still took the 30-round mags because the nations at the time did not have a mag cap limit like the US. The Dash 4 featured the same short rail, and the Dash 5 had the longer rail with iron sights like the American Dash 1. And because people preferred these guns in all black, that's where we get the SL8-6. As you see here, it's all black, had the short rail, interestingly, at least from the factory, not the long, and it had the ventilated handguard. But of course, being an American gun, it still took the 10-round mags. Not much on the Dash 7, Dash 8, Dash 9. There was an SL8-10, which is very, very similar to the SL8-4, but it was chambered in .222, which was considered a non-military caliber. Several nations, Spain, Italy, and others, did not allow civilian ownership of guns chambered in military rounds, so they did it in .222 Remington. Similar in 9mm, they would do 9x21. As far as I know, Italy recently repealed this, so there was a Dash 10. There was even what they called an R8, which was a manually operated, so no gas system, bolt-action version, which fed from 5 or 10 round mags. It was designed for England, Australia, but they didn't last long. By 2008, these were already effectively banned. And in America, the SL8-6s would continue to be imported until July of 2010, at which time HK USA announced that they were no longer bringing them in. That's because sales were not fantastic, and these were not easily convertible guns. Converting guns became popular after the sunset of the federal assault weapons ban, September 2004. And some guns, like the USC, could pretty easily be made into a semi-automatic UMP, but not this one. It required what they called polymer welding, because you had to keep the metal plate with the information of the gun, but cut it off and put it back, and it was a mess. And then, of course, you still had to do something about the barrel. And with that, let's take the handguards off and look at the barrels a little closer underneath. The first thing to note is, while the handguards are interchangeable, most of your military G36s have the push pin holding it on. This is a free-floated, there we go, handguard. The SL8 has this screw and thumb nut system with sling point. I have seen this on some machine guns as well, so it's not universal. It just makes it a little slower to take off, although it is bolted on a little tighter, I will admit, because it kind of squeezes it. But I wanted to take these off to show you. Here's our gas system, and you can really tell how much thicker this barrel is versus this. In fact, if you look at the standard gas block versus this one, this bulges out noticeably, meaning if you reprofile this barrel, you either have to leave it thicker under the gas block, or you have to get a new, different gas block. Or, of course, you could completely replace the barrel, but it is a good HK barrel. But it does add significant weight, and it's all out front, versus on the standard gun, where it's more towards the middle. Just wanted to mention that. So you're starting to see what all goes in. You either have to swap the barrel and gas block or reprofile. You can still use the gas system. You have to totally redo the receiver. You need a new mag well. And it doesn't just stop there. It does go to the internals too. So let's go to this double-ended dildo screw here and pull it apart. So here we've separated the receiver and unit. Notice again how the receiver is angled, comes back. No push pin holes. It's got a big hole for the screw on each side. And there's still a push pin in the front. So what holds this on? You do have a standard push pin here. And then you have a hex, an Allen screw on each side. And then our recoil is in the stock. Of course, it can be removed, but it's fixed to it here. Now, they do give you the HK multi-tool because you need a tool to take this out. But I just happened to grab a regular wrench. So, luckily, they don't insist you use a proprietary tool. With HK, it wouldn't surprise me. Metric wrench will do fine. So there's that, but there's something else I did want to show you, and that has to do with our bolt group, because we're not done with the fun yet. Even if you get a new grip and all that stuff, you can use the bolt carrier and charging handle. You cannot use the bolt. They actually shave down one of the bottom lugs so that it can only feed from the left side, working with the single stack magazine. How about them apples? See, the right side lug is not there, so it would not pick up from a standard magazine. So on top of everything else, you need a new bolt. You can use the group, but that's about it. So that is our dear SL8-6. Now, like I said, in 2010, HK USA announced they were no longer importing these and selling these. That's actually when I got a bunch from CD&N because they had them on clearance. However, in August of 2021, they announced they were bringing these back. So one has to ask why, and is it really worth converting? Unfortunately, at least to me and several others, the HK G36 is a pretty cool gun, and it has been used by the Bundeswehr for over a quarter century, as well as Spain, Saudi Arabia, and about 3 dozen other nations, plus several police departments in the USA. It is different. It is reliable, and actually, the owner of this gun, who had it sent here for a transfer, asked me why I like this G36 so much, which is kind of a funny question to ask for someone who just bought an SL8. And I'm not really sure. It does kind of feel like the Glock of rifles. It's simple, it's very reliable, but the trigger's not great. Even on the SL8, it's not fantastic. On the original gun, it's certainly not anything to write home about. It is pretty light, especially if you don't have an optic on it. So that's one thing. It uses proprietary mags, although you can get a NATO mag well for it. There's no good reason, except it is different, and it's emblematic of the 1990s. Not a lot of guns were being adopted in the late 90s, and so it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition of old and new technologies. At the end of the day, sometimes there's just not a reason. I really like it. So is one worth converting? Honestly, if one of the Tom Bostic clones, the what do they call it, the T36s won't scratch that itch, maybe. But just know that there's not a lot of parts you're going to be using out of it. The receiver has to be modified by a professional. You'll need a whole new mag well. Let me show you here. It just comes off through the pin. Well, maybe. Famous last words, right, guys? It's very easy to do when you're with two hands. Also, my hands are very greasy because this gun, for something else, was very greasy. Don't do things on video if you don't want to be made to look like a jerk. Trust me. You can tell how often I do not take the mag well off my gun. It's just gonna fight me, isn't it? Oh, now it pops out. All you have to do is just push the catch and get it off, but it's just kind of lodged in. There's no pin there. But I did want to show you that the magwell, simple polymer unit, but you still have the single stack receiver to deal with. So yeah, there's not much useful in the stock. Recoil spring, I guess. Bolt carrier. You can do something with the barrel and gas system. But everything else pretty much needs to be modified, and you'll need new mags. Now, you'll notice I've been taking this apart and putting it kind of in chunks. Because if everything I've told you isn't aggravating enough, I'm going to tell you something else that's going to make you even more annoyed. Are you ready for it? So, are you ready? Despite the fact that this can only accept 10-round magazines, has a non-folding, non-pistol grip stock, no flash hider, no bayonet lug, weighs upwards of 9 pounds, is roughly 39 inches long, depending on the spacer in the stock. It's still not legal in California, and this is going to California. Because it still takes a detaching mag and is a centerfire semi-automatic gun. So, going to ship it disassembled, and on the other end, the dealer manufacturer is going to have to install a Kydex grip wrap, plugging the hole in the butthole stock. Only then will it be legal. Still can't have any other fun features. I mean, still limited to 10-round mags. But it's what the customer wants. And frankly, yeah, if you're going to get an SL8 today, probably should just enjoy it for what it is, because who knows how long HK will keep bringing these in, and when they disappear, they will probably become kind of collectible in their own right. Because as a target gun, they are probably superior to the military. You have a heavier bull barrel, it's a little bit longer, you have a target crown, you have a better trigger, and 10 rounds is typically enough for target shooting for most people. So that's kind of its purpose. Like I said, one of the goals that HK was trying to go for with these was to make one into a DMR. And as we know, the original G36 isn't known especially well for its accuracy. I don't think it's as bad as many make it out to be, but it's no tack driver. But these are pretty good guns. 1.5 MOA, maybe better with proper setup. Whereas these are more like 2. But haven't had an SL8 on the channel in quite a while, and I needed to take this apart, so I figured I'd bring you along with me. But with that, my hands are very greasy, so I'm going to go wash my hands and grab a bite to eat and start bubble wrapping this thing up for the guy. I really do hope he enjoys it. By the way, he didn't buy it from me. This isn't a marketing thing. He just asked if I could help him out by receiving it, taking it apart, and then shipping it on to California, because a lot of dealers won't deal with California at all. But there we have it, folks. Hope everyone's doing well. If you could, please do like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, by the way, this was from a Patreon member, you can check out the link to the Patreon page. I will disassemble guns on camera for you then too. This is Misha. Catch you very soon. Next time.